Okay, let's see if that works. Yes, all right. It looks like it's working. It looks like it's working. All right, give it one moment. One moment. All right, I am live. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. So this is week 2. Give me 1 second. All right. Whew. My apologies, guys. I'm gonna try to edit that out whenever I put this in the actual course. But hello again. This is week 2 of the Finish Your First Comic or Manga. My name is Jay Odin. I, draw Hammer and Saturday AM. I've also been the artist of the Rick and Morty manga, and this entire course is basically just to teach you how to create your own comic. So, in week 1, we talked about story structure. And this week, we're going to be talking about starting your thumbnails. This is a roadmap of the entire course. And if you are interested in coming back for week 3, 4, 5, then, definitely, continue your membership. If you are purchasing this, then obviously you could just watch the next video right after we're done. But let's get to it. All right, so at the end of week 1, I had an assignment for everybody, which was to finalize your character design, as well as also lay out your story structure, the beginning, middle, and end of your story. So for this entire course, we are going to be turning your idea into a comic and finalizing the character design as a whole, not just the design, the outward design, but also internally, like, who's that character, like what are their motivations, so on and so forth. Okay. So like I said, the look for your character is now more solidified, but now it's time to go a little bit deeper. Who exactly are they? By giving them certain traits and knowing what they would do in certain situations, you begin to flesh out their character a little bit more. Inside of my ebook, which I'm going to be going to the next slide and you'll see there some screenshots of it, I actually give a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different things that you should be giving your character so that way they can be fleshed out a little bit more. So one of them is you give them a clear want, not just a goal, because a goal is external and a want is emotional. You want your readers to connect to why the character is acting. So, for instance, Naruto. I think I said this actually inside of one of my shorts, a few months ago, maybe at this point. But Naruto wants to become the Hokage. That's his goal. But why does he want to become the Hokage? The reason why is because he wants to be recognized by his village. So that's the want behind the actual goal. So that's what you need for your character, because that's what makes the reader latch onto them a little bit more, makes them feel a little bit more like somebody that they can get to know. So yeah, just try to keep that in mind. Try to see if you can answer that for your character. What is their goal and what is their want? They shouldn't be the same thing. So, number 2, give them struggles immediately. This is more of just trying to make the reader actually care about your character a little bit more. If they struggle immediately, then it builds an attachment. It shows your character is making mistakes or failing. That's another way for, the reader to latch onto your character a little bit more. And it also makes the reader root for your character a little bit more as well. It makes all the victories that they get actually worth it. So for instance, when you see Naruto again, like, he was a loser. He kept on messing up. He failed out of ninja school. He was, everybody knows that scene where he's on the the swing, and you got the sad music playing off in the background, and all that, and you instantly start to feel for this character, and then you see him go through like just everything. Like, he had a really, really rough time, but whenever there was that victory, I remember one of the first times I screamed and I was like, I was like super excited for Naruto, was when him and Sasuke were fighting Zabuza, and he kind of outsmarted him and they were able to free Kakashi. That was such an amazing moment, because you had seen Naruto up to this point do so much. He, even stabbed his hand specifically so that way he can remember the pain along with the promise that he made, which is, I need to move forward. I cannot be this cowardly ninja. If I ever want to become Hokage, I have to, get past this. And that's the reason why he did everything that he did up to that point. And it was such a cool moment, and it made you really not only root for that character, but it made that victory actually mean something. So give them struggles immediately, because it makes the reader actually care about your character. Give them a flaw as well. Give them a flaw that costs them. Flaws only matter if there are consequences. The flaw needs to hurt the character or their relationship in some way to resonate with that reader. What's a good, sticking with Naruto, what's a good flaw that he had? He was, so, I'm not sure if this is actual flaw, but like, it makes sense to me. Like, as a ninja, having a bright orange jumpsuit probably is not something that you want for a stealthy ninja. Like, it's a clear contradiction, in all honesty. However, I guess this wouldn't be a flaw per se, because, there were a lot of people that said you're the most unpredictable ninja, I guess, but that was more of a, cool moniker that he had eventually. What would be another flaw? Let me think. For Naruto specifically, I'm trying to think about an actual flaw. I haven't read Naruto. I have like 70 volumes, but I haven't read it in like forever. Okay, so he wasn't actually, like, he didn't know how to do much. He was dumb, per se. He was very determined, however. But because of that flaw, the consequences were, like, he kept on failing. It took him a long time to actually, like, learn what he needs to learn, like with chakra control, for instance. And the consequences of that is he just wasn't already at that level that he needed to be in order to continue on. Like, obviously, as you read the story, you see him overcome all these flaws, and he gets, better and better and better. But, that is definitely one thing. However, speaking about Naruto in this instance, I want to keep it with Naruto because I feel like this is a good example. But, Naruto in general is a good example, but I haven't read it in a long time. So I'm going to switch it up so that way you guys can understand a little bit more. I'm not sure if you've watched or know anything about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think I use this also inside of one of my shorts. But, one of the things that she had to do with, like, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was season 2. At the very end of season 2, she had to kill her boyfriend, who had become a demon essentially towards the middle of the season. And once, their battle was happening at the very end of the season, he was about to destroy the world, and, something happened where they were basically able to make him good again, but the world was about to end, and unless Buffy killed him, like, the world was going to be destroyed. So this flaw was more of like just, the fact that she cared about both her boyfriend and also the world, like, equally. Like, I guess that's not necessarily a flaw, but it's more of a consequence, I guess, is what I'm, like, referring to right now. This is a choice that she had to make, and it was really, really difficult for her. If I'm not mistaken, I think I actually mentioned this a little bit further down this entire list, but this is something that forces your character to make a hard decision. And when you do that, it makes the reader actually realize, okay, not only is this a character that's completely fleshed out, but you're also giving them struggles. You're beating them up, like, internally, physically, or whatever. And you're making the reader care about them a little bit more. It makes them want to find out how they're going to get out of whatever situation that they're in. How they can overcome their flaw, or, work around it in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, this, again, that might not be like the best example, but that's essentially, what I'm talking about with that. Yeah, so number 4, that was the exact, the next one. Put them in situations they can't fight out of, force difficult choices, more ethical dilemmas, reveal who the character really is. So, just like the Buffy example, She could live happily ever after with her boyfriend who, finally now is good again, or she can kill him so that way she can save the world. That is a hard choice. Obviously, if you watch the entire series, then you know that like she goes through a lot. But in short, this is something that she had to do in order to save the world. And even though she doesn't necessarily want to be the Slayer, she still does what she needs to do because she's in that role. She knows that, hey, I'm the only one that can actually save the world. So it shows her character. It makes her even more so of a hero, essentially. Number 5, give them personal stakes in the world. The story needs to affect the character personally in some way. Do they gain or lose something meaningful? I guess this can go right back to, the same example. She loses the connection that she has with her boyfriend, Angel. Let me see if I can think of another example real quick off the top of my head. So, bringing it to one of my own characters, I'll talk about Chicken Fight. The personal stakes that he had inside of that entire story is he needed to make sure that the entire town was safe from these giant evil chickens. And by doing that, he would make it safe for his newborn baby to actually grow up in a town and not have to wonder or worry if there is going to be a giant evil chicken that comes out of nowhere. So those are the high stakes that, he's, involved in. And when he is fighting Clucky at the very end, he loses, well, I don't want to spoil everything, but I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. He loses an arm. He's in this, fight, and he's fighting essentially to the death with this giant chicken. And, that was something that he knew that he would have to do, eventually, fighting chickens and all. But he loses an arm, and that's something that changes him forever. Physically, I guess. It's not necessarily more of a mental thing, but I mean, that's still something that happens to him. So, I mean, I probably should have had more examples for this entire section, but in short, all of these are still things that you should add to your own character. By doing this, it allows you to make them feel more real. It makes them feel more relatable for the reader, and it's just a lot better in terms of writing stories revolving around these certain types of situations as well. For instance, I have another, thing to talk about, when it comes to Hammer. I haven't actually drawn this yet. This is going to be inside of the next volume, but there's going to be a hard decision that Stud is going to have to make when his, father is talking to him. I mean, again, I don't want to spoil that because it hasn't even come out yet, but let's just say I'm taking a lot of this advice and I'm adding it to my own story as well. Because now that I've learned a lot more, I really want to level up my own storytelling. So again, when it comes to stories in general, having your character go through these types of situations really allows the reader to connect with them. And that's what you want. Not only is that what you want, but you want your main character, he is or she is the star of that story. I mean, yeah, there are going to be other characters as well, but the entire story is about that character. What struggles are they going through? What is their actual goal? How do they get to their goal? That's basically the entire thing about your story. That's what you need to keep in mind. So by giving them all these situations, you are essentially making them a real person, or at least real enough to where the reader is very invested in what happens to this character. And that's what you want, because that's what keeps them coming back. So all of these character dilemmas and such are basically just other ways to help you make your character more relatable to that reader. So I'll read a few more of these and then, we'll get to the next thing. Number 6, make them act, not just react. Your character needs to be making choices that drive the plot forward. Your reader will become more invested if you create agency within your character. So, one example that comes to mind that did not do this would be Bleach, for instance. I love Bleach. I actually have a bunch of volumes on my shelf, or at least I think 20. But this is something that I didn't necessarily see a lot of. Ichigo was a pretty cool character, but like he was just essentially reacting to whatever happened to him. It wasn't necessarily something that he went out and said, "Hey, I want to be the Shinigami king." Like, Naruto and One Piece, for instance. It was more of like, hey, I just want to, make sure that my friends are okay. But once he saved his friend, the only thing that the reason why the next arc after saving Rukia was basically saving Orihime was because he was just reacting to what was happening to him. It wasn't necessarily like I have an active goal. I'm trying to make sure that I can have it, be fulfilled. So even though Bleach was amazing in its own way and all of that, I don't have to talk about that right now, but even though Bleach was really, really good, Ichigo still wasn't the type of character that acts. He was more reactive, and that's what you should want. You want your character to act, so that way everything can be essentially a result of whatever decision that they made. So when you look at One Piece, you see Luffy. He's like, I want to travel the world. I want to, get these people on my team. I want to, become Pirate King. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's what drives like literally everything. So personally, I would say if you do create a character that reacts only, make sure that like it is not only just as interesting as every single time he has to react to whatever. Don't make it like repetitive. Like, hey, my best friend just got kidnapped, so I need to save them. Okay, I saved them. Oh wait, my other best friend got kidnapped. Let me go save them. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. Not only because it's already been done, obviously, but also I think that it just makes it more easy to stop liking your story if it's the exact same thing over and over and over again. So, yeah. Let me get to the next one. Number 7, show care through their actions, helping when no one knows, keeping their word. These build emotional connections with the reader. You can even have them care for something like a pet or a plant. I really like this one. I actually have one movie that comes to mind. What was that? I think it's called The Professional, if I'm not mistaken. This is 1990s. Natalie Portman was in this movie. She was like 13, like she was really young. So it's a pretty old movie. But in this movie, it's about this professional assassin, and the entire time he is, he's killing people, he's doing all this other stuff. But you, as the viewer, really care about this person, and the reason why is because you get to see like a softer side of him. It might not be all the time, but you still get to see this. And he's like watering plants. Like he's just living his life. And, he's a professional. He's doing the assassination thing, because obviously he's making money and this is what he's good at and all that. But, I also like to preface this entire thing by saying I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but I do remember this one part. But yeah, him taking care of a plant, like, that's something that makes him more human. And then, he obviously, branches out. He takes care of Natalie Portman eventually. And you're like, okay, well, he's a pretty decent guy, even though he's killing people. So, humanizing your character by showing certain traits like that, that's also a really good thing to keep in mind. Number 8, give them a distinct voice that does your character. I'm sorry. Give them a distinct voice. What does your character notice, avoid, obsess over, joke about? These all come from our character's perspective. So, for instance, what comes to mind right now when it comes to like One Piece and Luffy, there's several times where you just see him poking, like, picking his nose. He wipes his booger on Usopp, like in several different random panels. They joke about a lot of stuff. Like he's, pretty immature, but, he's also really passionate and, all that. You get to see him, he cares about everybody on his team, even though he doesn't really necessarily know fully their entire backstory. He might know a few of them, but most of the time he's just like, I already have my mind made up. I don't need to care or hear about your backstory to care about you more. Prime example is Nami. He falls asleep throughout that entire backstory, or he walks away. I forgot exactly which one, but my point is that that character is fleshed out so much so that you know what he's going to joke about or what's going to actually resonate with him, how he obsesses over like becoming the Pirate King and doing all this other stuff, how he, you know, avoids boredom. Like he does all these things because he's completely fleshed out. So try to have that for your character. You know, I'm sorry for not necessarily having these examples already planned out. It's kind of just going off the cuff right now. But even so, everything I'm saying, you know, holds very true. You can see all of these, you know, obviously by just rewatching this portion of the video, or you can, you know, check out my Finish Your Comic ebook because I go through a lot of them there. When your character is fleshed out, writing all the minuscule details of your comic become easier. And now that you have a filled out story structure, you know, the beginning, middle, and end, it will be easier to move on to the next step and lay it all out. So, again, just to reiterate, having your character fleshed out makes everything else substantially easier when you are writing your story. Because, again, your character is what your story is about. You want everything to be based around that character. You know, I think I said this earlier, but like obviously there's going to be other characters that you focus on, but the main character, the star of your comic is the main character. That's what you want to focus on. What is their story? What is their goal? What is, you know, what are they reacting to or, you know, trying to actively do? Because once you have all of that fleshed out, it makes it a lot easier for you to write how they're going to move within that world. So, but like I said, you know, if you did the assignment from the first video, week 1, then you have the beginning, middle, and end of your story. And if you have that, it makes it so much easier to actually write, you know, what you need to write to lay out this comic. Now, for this particular course, I didn't say this in the first video. I wish I had, but just to, you know, like, you know, drive it home. I think I did say this one part, but I'm going to like kind of like tighten the noose a little bit more. But you need to have, especially if this is your very first comic, what you need is a finishable idea. I'm tightening the noose by saying I recommend that this idea or this comic that you're going to draw needs to be between 5 and 10 pages. So that's me tightening up the noose. I don't want you to think of a story that's like 50, 60 pages and you're like, man, I'm so excited. I'm going to do this. I'm taking this course and, you know, they're going to teach me how to do, you know, all of this. And yes, you can apply all of the lessons I'm going to be teaching inside of this course for a comic that's going to be a lot longer. But the reason why I'm tightening up the noose and the reason why I believe it should be a finishable idea is because when you finish up a comic, after you finish up the comic, you have a W in your pocket. You're you know, hopefully going to be excited to work on the next one. But ultimately, because you finished up one already, you now know, okay, this is how long it took. This is how much fun I had. This is, you know, how I structured my free time so that way I could get this done. Like, you have experience now. And with that experience, you can work on the next comic. Maybe that's also 10 pages. And then the next comic, maybe that one's 15. And then the next one after that is 30, 45, 50, 60, entire series, whatever it may be. When I did Chicken Fight, I believe I mentioned in the first video that Chicken Fight was actually a finishable idea. It was a finishable idea for me because I had been doing one-shots for a long time. Like, I knew how to draw a comic. You know, it wasn't my first rodeo. And, you know, I figured that drawing a 12-chapter series would be a really good test run to see exactly whether or not I could do it, 1, and also 2, you know, just to obviously get the idea out of my head. But I really think that you should focus on trying to get that W in your pocket. That's what you want. You want the experience. You want the win. So, food for thought. And yeah, again, you know, remember this course is about finishing your comic. If it's too long, you might give up before it's done. So keeping it small and simple makes it very finishable. So keep that in mind. Now, when you begin to draw longer stories, the first thing you need to figure out when laying out everything is how many pages it will be. Now, if you are going to do the 5 to 10 pages, or if this is you know, if you're ready to do something that's longer, like that's up to you, obviously. But if you did something that's longer, what you need to do is figure out exactly how many pages it is. Because once you know that, you can move on to the next step. So let me kind of go through what I'm saying right here. I'm saying, is it a one shot? Is it a chapter of your series? Is it going to be self-published, or is it going to be published with a company? If it's a one shot, then, having the page number is obviously very important because you want to know how many pages you're going to be drawing. However, if it's going to be self-published or published, then you need to know whether or not that's going to be printed. Like if it's self-published, then if you're going to print it, you need to know exactly how many pages it's going to be. Or if it's going to be digital, that's not really as big of a deal. But if you're going to self-publish it and you need to know exactly how many pages it's going to be, you need to figure out how much money it's going to cost to print it out. If you did it on your own, then, like, let's say you do KDP Amazon. I'll use Chicken Fight as an example. I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but Chicken Fight is a 300-page book. Roughly, a little bit more, a little bit less, something like that. But when I uploaded the file to KDP, Amazon, in order for me to get $5 for every book that's sold, I would have to sell it at $15 because printing out that 300-page book costs roughly $10. So because I know that, if I were to do another book that was 300 pages, I would just make sure that I understand that I'm only going to make $5 from this book. However, if, like, let's say I did a one shot that was 20 pages and I still want to print it out for some reason, personally, I would say you should probably make it a little bit longer if you're going to print it out. But whatever, we don't have to talk about that. I mean, personally, if you're going to do a one shot, I would just say do it digitally. But we can talk about that in a few seconds. But the reason why I'm saying find out exactly how many pages it's going to be is because you need to, like, at the end of the day, when it comes to drawing comics and you're trying to do it professionally, you want to know exactly how much money that you can make. And when you are trying to plan all that out, knowing exactly how much money you can make before you even start it will hopefully guide you into knowing exactly how many pages you should make it. So 300 pages, that's pretty long in terms of how much money that I'll be getting for that book. Selling it at $15, some people don't want to spend $15. If they do, that's awesome, but I would still just make $5 from it. So, try to keep that example in mind whenever you're thinking, okay, I want to self-publish this and I want to make this into a book that is going to be printed on demand. If, let's say, you printed it out yourself and you found a printer that was able to do that, and you had like a bulk amount of books printed, then you might be able to get a cheaper rate. However, you would just be spending more money on the front end. So, for instance, if I've heard of books be printed, like let's say you printed out 1,000 books, and I think the printer that I heard for this was in China, but I know that there's other printers in America as well as also, I think, Canada as well. But my point is that in China, you print out 1,000 books and each book is $3. So you pay $3,000 and you get 1,000 books. Now you can turn around and you can sell each of those books for $15, and that's a huge, return. However, you just gotta, upfront $3,000. There's other ways to do it if you have your own printer as well, but I'm sure that's going to cost a lot because you got to buy that equipment. So, either way, if you're doing it and you want a physical book that you can sell, it's going to cost a lot. If you do want a physical book, personally, I would say that having it be print on demand is probably the cheapest and easiest way for you. Now, if you're doing it digitally, I've said this multiple times and other things. I'm not sure if I said it in my previous video, but by drawing or self-publishing it digitally, they can download it whenever and you just get that money. So for instance, for Chicken Fight, I sell it on my Gumroad for $5 because if I sell the actual book, I'm going to get $5 back. And I think $5 is a pretty decent, like it's not a bad price point, especially for 300 something pages. So like, I think that that's a pretty decent price point and it's a low barrier of entry. So again, if you're going to be doing something digitally and you're self-publishing it, then just know exactly how much money you want to make from it. And, that might also dictate how many pages you want it to be. If you know that you can sell a book that's 20 pages for $2, then do that. Or maybe you make it free, or maybe you make it $20. Like who knows? Like that's totally up to you. But my point is that whether you print it out physically or you do it digitally, whichever way you do it, that should dictate exactly how many pages it's going to be. Now, that's talking about a one-shot. When you talk about a series, let's say that every chapter in your series is going to be the same. 20 pages, 15 pages, whatever amount you want it to be. What I normally tell people, or what I've done anyway, is I'll find out exactly how big the book needs to be. So if I'm going to do this as a self-publish and I, let's say, want to do 300 pages, I know I'm going to get $5 back if I do this as a print to order. So now I have 300 pages. What I would do is I would say, I would take that 300 pages and then I would divide it into however many equal parts that I want to draw. So like if I want every chapter to be 20 pages long, then I would just divide that by 300 and voila, I have my, chapter, number. That's just an example though. If you wanted to, if you're doing that as a self-publish, if you want this to be published, then what I would suggest is you look at the publisher that you are trying to send your work to. If you want your book to be published with Saturday AM, for instance, or Viz Media, or Yen Press, or Marvel, or Image, or whatever the case may be. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of hurdles to get through, pretty much all of them. But let's say you are hell-bent on making that happen. If that is the case, then what you should do is look at one of their books, find out exactly how many pages it is, and then do all of the calculations that I just went through for that 300-page book. For instance, Hammer, this is volume 5 of Hammer. The deal that we have with Quarto, every book could be at max 224 pages. So normally what I would do is I would draw either 200 pages or I would stop at like 216 or, something like that. So that way I have a little bit of extra, because obviously you need to have the beginning pages, because that counts also as page 1, page 2, and 3. And then, I get into the story. But there's also back pages as well. There's like an acknowledgement, end of credits. Sometimes there's a post-credit scene. So like it just kind of depends. But by knowing how many pages it can be, or max, how many pages it will be in terms of like, this is the max amount that you have, it allows me to know, okay, I need to break up my entire volume in this many chapters. And I want every chapter to be, 7 pages long, or, whatever the case may be. That will also allow you to figure out exactly how many pages what you're going to be drawing is going to be. Now, what is the reason for this long rant that I just went on talking about how many pages, or how do you dictate how many pages you're going to be drawing? The reason why is because of this next step. Once you have the page count, it's time to utilize my favorite method for writing, which is the bullet point method. The bullet point method is when you are going to list out however many pages your comic is, and then write a sentence describing each page in one sentence. So, for instance, let's say, I actually think I have an example on the next slide, but, when it comes to the bullet point method, you're going to be, let's say I do an entire comic for 20 pages. I'll have 20 bullet points, And each bullet point is going to be that one sentence describing what happens on that page. I'll get into this again in the next slide when I, show the example. But obviously, this is just what I do. I do believe that this is probably the quickest way to actually write your comic and lay it out. However, if you're better at writing a script, you could do that, or you can write it in prose. Just the difference, so that way you all know. Bullet points, obviously, you're just doing bullet points, sentence for each one. If you write a script, what you do is normally you'll have a page that says, this is page 1, panel 1, this happens, dialogue. Panel 2, this happens, dialogue. Panel 3, this happens, so on and so forth. And then when you write it in prose, that's essentially just writing it as a novel. Best example I can give is like something like Harry Potter. Like, Harry then said, Inspector Patronus, or whatever, and then got on his broom and flew away. Like, I don't know, but like that, those are the differences. Each of those are valid. Personally, I would say if you're writing your story by yourself and you're doing everything on your own, doing it the bullet point method is, like I said, probably the best route, mainly because you already know what your story is. So you know what the dialogue is going to be. You know all the small little details that you're going to be drawing. You know all of that. And because of that, wasting time by writing out an entire script making sure that you stick to it it's just a waste of time. Like you don't need to do that. Having it as a sentence allows you to instantly know, okay, this is what I was thinking about for this page. This is what needs to happen on it. If you write it in prose, same thing. I mean, maybe you wrote it out first and then, this happened a long time ago and you come back to it and you say, you know what, let me make this into a comic. You can do that as well. But I mean, even still, like you got to break it down in some way. Like if I was to read a Harry Potter book and I looked at the entire first page or however many first pages that I read, like let's say I read the first 20 pages, I'm pretty positive that I could break down every one of those pages into maybe 2 pages. So instead of it being 20, it's actually 40 comic book pages. I have no idea. I guess it just depends on how much detail is actually going into every one of those pages. Maybe it is just one full comic book page. Like it just kind of depends on, how it's written out. However, if you are working as a team and maybe you're the writer, and you have an artist that's, drawing your comic, I do specifically always recommend doing a script. Mainly because if you, as the writer, have a specific idea that you want the artist to convey for these pages, having a script allows them to know, okay, this is what needs to happen on page 1, panel 1, this is the dialogue, so on and so forth. There's no interpretation, essentially. Just art, style, I guess, would be the only interpretation. But they don't need to think about what they need to draw. Like you're already writing it out for them. By doing the bullet point method, it allows them to have a lot more leeway. Because, like I said, when it comes to the bullet points, which I'm going to get to in a few seconds in the next slide, but when it comes to the bullet points, that one sentence doesn't tell you this happens in panel 1, this happens in panel 2, so on and so forth. This is just, hey, at the very end of the day, at the end of the page, this needs to happen, no matter what. You can describe this entire sentence throughout the page in one panel, whatever the case may be. As long as this happens on this page, you're good. So that's, the difference between drawing a script and a bullet point. When it comes to prose, it's the same thing in terms of interpretation. Just like that example that I gave with Harry Potter. Like if I can interpret one page into 2, maybe even 3 comic book pages, then I could just keep on drawing. It doesn't necessarily need to be a one-to-one type of scenario when it comes to writing it out in prose. So if you're a writer and you have an artist that's working with you, personally, I would say write a script because it allows you to be very specific with what you want. But like I said, when I am talking about the bullet points, because that's my favorite method and I want you guys to be as successful as you can be and also not waste time. This is an example. I'm going to use the same character from week 1 and put him into a 5-page one-shot. Maybe I will draw this one-shot. Maybe I won't. I did not do any thumbnail examples today. However, that doesn't necessarily matter for what I'm going to be teaching, and I'm sure you guys will still get it. But This would be what I would do if I was going to lay out like an entire thumbnail, one shot. So Eli Erickson is walking to work. Suddenly he comes across a beautiful girl. She asks him for help defeating a monster, but it turns out she is the monster trying to kill him. However, Eli already knew and destroys her and then continues walking to work. So that's the entire one shot, 5 pages. More than likely, I probably will draw this if I have time, because not only do I think this is a really cool like one shot, but also I would like for you guys to see how I do this. But in short, when it comes to laying out the entire story, like that's all you have to do. Each one of these bullet points is a sentence. It gets right to the point. There's no fluff. It's just straight on. But use this as a good example when it comes to the bullet point method. Take the idea that you have and try to make your one shot lay it out in this way. And if you can, then I promise you, it's going to be a lot easier for you to continue on. Now, after writing out the bullet points, I would start the thumbnail process. And remember, the goal is to translate the bullet point into a page. Like I just said earlier, that means that whatever you draw, as long as it matches up to the bullet point, you've succeeded. So it doesn't need to be something that is you don't need to overthink this, essentially. Now, here are some tips to keep in mind. Try making sure that your panel layouts have anywhere between 3 and 6 panels per page. 5 is usually a sweet spot. So I don't have volume 1 of Hammer, but if you do have volume 1 of Hammer, then you'll see that like I did not keep that in mind for the beginning chapter of Hammer. That there's a lot of reasons for that, and I can get into that in probably another video, not in the course. But there are some pages that have like 10. I think I got up to like 13 panels on a page. It looks cluttered. It's not an easy read, and that's not what you want. I obviously got better as time continued, but like looking at volume 5 of Hammer, see, you can look at this one page right here, and it has 5 panels. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like I said, that's kind of a sweet spot. This is another one. I think it has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, anywhere between 3 and 6 panels is usually a good sweet spot. Sometimes you can have one like splash page, which is just one panel of the, covering the entire page. You can have 2 panels. That can also be considered as a splash page. But yeah, it just kind of depends on, what the story is and, how you want to lay it out. But when it comes to laying it out, a lot of artists tend to struggle with this. They overthink it and, they get in their head, and then they're not able to actually draw it in the way that they see in their head. So here are some things that I think if you keep in mind, it'll make it a lot easier. Like I said, number 1, don't overthink this. Just make sure that every page is fun to draw. One piece of advice I gave to somebody a long time ago is if you can make every page look like an illustration, but like it's obviously still telling a story, but there's like maybe one really cool, awesome big panel, and like it kind of ties into everything else, like the composition looks good and all that. If you can do that and it seems really, really fun just to look at, and it's even more fun to draw, then you're doing really, really well. So I would, try to keep that in mind. If you're having fun, and as long as every page is fun to draw and you're not overthinking this, then more than likely you'll be fine. Number 2, mimic what you read. Try emulating what you see in your favorite comics or manga. I can't stress that enough. A lot of people that I've met but what? Scratch that. Me personally, I am a visual learner. I have several manga and comics inside of my room right now. You see this entire shelf right here, but like there's an entire shelf right there. There's another shelf right there. Like it's crazy. I have a lot of manga and comics, and I've read practically every single one of them at least once, maybe twice or 3 times, depending on what the series or the book is. And my point in saying that is I study it, not necessarily like I need to like memorize every single page. I'm like, okay, well, this happens here and this happens here, and like this is what they say. But like I read it so much that like I start to pick up on certain things. Like, oh, okay, this is how these word balloons are placed. This is how they did this one particular scene when he was falling. They had a really long panel, or an establishing shot is always usually long in a horizontal sense as opposed to a vertical, unless there's stairs, in which case doing a vertical is really good. Or maybe the splash page because it's a awesome punch, or whatever the case may be. These are just a lot of the thoughts that go through my head, and the reason why is because I have been reading these comics. I've seen these techniques be used and practically everything that I have on my shelves. So that's what you need to do as well. I'm not sure if you're a visual learner. I would assume so because all the artists that I've met in some way, shape, or form are visual learners. So again, just try emulating what you see in your favorite comics or manga, because that is definitely a very, very big help. Number 3, focus on the reading flow of the page. This is probably the most important. What you want to always make sure of is that your reader is not confused when they are reading your story. You are taking them from the top left of your page to the bottom right of your page. Obviously, if you are in an Eastern country, it might be a little bit different. It might be from the top right all the way to the bottom left. But generally speaking, in Western-speaking countries, especially America, it's top left to the bottom right. And it also usually follows a Z shape, a zigzag, and I'll get into that a little bit more as well. But the reading flow is the most important. Yes, have fun. Yes, try emulating your favorite manga and comics. But if no one can understand where to go next in your page, then you are just doing it wrong. You want them to not be confused. You're trying to convey a story to them. So again, just try to focus on the reading flow, because that is very, very important. All right. Now, while you're working on the thumbnails, keep in mind the word balloons can also be used to guide the reader's eye. The word balloons, like I said, they always follow a Z-like pattern. So as an example, I show a lot of these examples actually inside of that ebook that I mentioned earlier, the Finish Your Comic Book in 30 days or less. So if you don't already have that, I highly recommend getting it, because it kind of goes through all of these and gives a lot more examples. However, here are some examples right here. This isn't a perfect Z shape, but you get my point. If you follow that red line, it shows you specifically like where your eyes should go. Let me take this off real quick. Give me 1 second. So as you can see right here, it goes. It's like a Z, a zigzag, Z, Z. This is a kind of like a 2, and then like it just goes up. So I mean, my point is that like as you read the actual dialogue, your eyes are not only flowing through the comic and you're seeing all these details, but you're not confused. This is from a comic I did a while ago called Life Agent. So if you guys would like to get that, that's actually free, a free download on my Gumroad, so you can go check that out. But you need to follow the Z shape. And you can even incorporate your sound effects with that as well. So as you can see on this one, he says, there's like a sound effects of like some roaring. He's like, rah, but there's also, the words right in front of it. So he screams, and then you see this. This is like a memory, sound effects, exclamation point, question mark, or, whatever. But it still counts. When you look right here, you can see it says Doom, and then it goes to, this panel, because, even though he's not saying anything, that's where your eyes are kind of leading to. And then it goes down, and you see Nash, 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 Nash. Those are some other sound effects. So like your eyes are being moved through the page based off of the words that are there. Not only that, but also just like because if you look at the panels themselves, just like right here, you're taking it from the top left all the way to the bottom right. So yeah, just food for thought. Try to keep this in mind. I promise you it's not difficult, but you just got to do it enough times to actually, get into the habit of doing it. Now, this is some other thumbnail advice. I don't really want to get into every single thing specifically, just because I don't want to. Let me move this so that way you guys can read it all. I don't want to make this too long. It's already. I think I've already been talking for about 30 minutes or so, but definitely reread this on your free time. It will, greatly help you. This is all inside of my ebook, the drawing or finishing your comic in 30 days or less ebook. So, you can obviously just pause this video and read this right now. Take notes, whatever. But like that is what you should do, because this will greatly help you when it comes to laying out your thumbnails. It kind of, just one great example is, using strong silhouettes. Generally speaking, whenever you're drawing thumbnails, I mean, you don't necessarily have to actually make them detailed at all. Personally, a lot of people will, so personally, what I do is I'll make them detailed enough because I usually just enlarge them and then I, pencil over them and start inking and all that stuff. That's what I do because I draw digitally. It makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker. However, if you are just trying to make sure that your thumbnails are readable and easy to understand, then you could just do stick figures. I mean, whatever works best for you. But having a good, strong silhouette allows you to know, okay, this stick figure has this hat. And I know that the main character has this hat, so that's the reason why I use this hat. And that's a good, strong silhouette for you to, recognize. And then whenever you draw your pencils, you'll know, okay, this is that character, this is this character, this is what I need to do. So, just food for thought. This is just, another example. But definitely read this if you are, wanting to get a lot of knowledge in regards to thumbnails. Like I said, reread through all of that and keep everything else that I've said in mind, and you will be fine. I promise you. So that is the end of this course. Next week, we are going to be penciling, which is basically taking the thumbnails and making tighter pencils to ink over later. And we're also going to be discussing dialogue. Like I said, more than likely, I will draw the, 5-page thumbnail layout that I, talked about with Eli Erickson. So, keep an eye out for that, because I would love to show you guys just what I do. And I think that would also really help. However, when it comes to next week, the assignment is to finish your thumbnails. Focus on the reading flow. And if the reading flow is off, the comic will be confusing. So just make sure that it's not confusing. That's the only real thing that you need to keep in mind. But, yeah, I think that's it. Hold on, that's not... Here it is. Yeah, I think that's it. I really appreciate you watching this. Thank you for purchasing this. If you're watching this after having bought the entire course, and if you are watching this live, thank you again. I really appreciate you. But yeah, I think that's it. So I'll see you next week or in the next video.